So we'll talk about prayer and meditation and spirituality. This is a very, very close to my heart subject. And then we'll talk about the truth of the Bible. We'll talk a little bit about, how we determine if things are true or not. We'll talk about that as well. And after we talk about prayer and meditation and proof of the Bible, we're going to talk a little bit about the different movements of Judaism and how we fit in now that our designation has changed a little bit. So, Diana, good evening.
Hi.
Hi, Diana. Welcome.
Hello, Diana.
There you are.
I'm good.
Diana, where are you tonight?
Hello.
What? Your internet's kind of slow. What? Your internet is kind of frozen, so your internet is frozen, but I hope you'll be able to. I hope you'll be
Home.
able.
She's home. She wrote it down in the chat. She's home.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's get started. I'm going to bring up probably my favorite prayer leader in a second here. And whenever I go out of town to conventions and Jewish learning opportunities, this woman is there, and she has a special place in my heart for teaching Judaism and prayer. I'll bring it up on the screen, and then I'll click on share screen. Share screen, and go there and click that, and her name is Deborah Sachs Minks. I want to make sure you can hear it, though. That's the other thing. Click on share, turn on the sound. There it is. Okay.
ברכי נפשי את אדוני לחוקבי את שם קודשו.
Can you hear that?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
ברכי נפשי את אדוני לחוקבי את שם קודשו. עצומות עוזך, הגדול בכבוד שמך, הגיבור לנצח. והנורא בנורותיך, המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. האל בתעצומות עוזך, הגדול בכבוד שמך, הגיבור לנצח. והנורא בנורותיך, המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא. ברכי נפשי את אדוני את שם קודשו.
Bless my soul.
ברכי נפשי את אדוני בחוקבי את שם קודשו. האל בתעצומות עוזך, הגדול בכבוד שמך, הגיבור לנצח. והנורא בנורותיך, המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא.
Can anybody hear anything?
Can you not hear that?
I can't. Michelle can. Okay.
Michelle, can you hear it?
I was hearing it just fine.
I've got the chills. I've got the chills. Wow.
This is the most exciting prayers. She leads prayers all over the country, but this is what the new intentionality and spirituality are. It's taking a short prayer and repeating it with different melodies. This is beautiful.
Oh, it's cool.
לכבוד שמך הגיבור לנצח והנורא בנורותיך המלך היושב על כיסא רם ונישא
Wow. 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 Oh my God.
I get chills.
Totally.
Listening to, and it's, it's just repeating the same phrase again. It's really,
Yeah.
it goes from Friday night service. May my soul bless the Lord. You, the Lord God, you are great. You are clothed in majesty. It doesn't mean, not so much the meaning, but the feeling that they put into it.
Oh, and everybody's feeling joy.
Yes.
You can see that. You can feel that.
So
Yeah.
this is the ultimate goal of prayer, is joy. Joy is connecting with God. I'm wearing a ring right now that Renana got me. My fiance Renana got me for Hanukkah, and I can't see it here, but it says L'chuna ranana ladonai.
Ooh, yeah.
Go to God in song and rejoice. Have joy.
Oh, that's perfect.
Renana in Hebrew means joyous song. This is the woman I'm marrying. So,
That's awesome.
and what should prayer be? My question is, prayer means different things to different people. For some, it's reading this boring old book, and you're reading it again and again, and you say the same words every week. What does it mean?
Mhm.
But if you can touch the soul, like these people just did for me, and even imagine having them in person, because they reach a rhythm and a level that's way below the subconscious. This is it represents yearning, it represents beauty, it's joy. It's the female voice. In Orthodox Judaism, women don't sing in the public, in front of other people. In Reform service and conservative and Reform and the rest of the Jewish world, women are cantors. Here in Wisconsin, the majority of cantors are women in Wisconsin and Minnesota. So that changed from 20 years ago when there were no cantors, no female cantors. And it's because women, not only the range of their voice, but because they have a special connection with Shekhinah, the feminine side of God, that men just don't have. So it's not sexism. It's just that God has different attributes for different people, and they reach God in different ways. God has always been shown this giant male on the top of the Sistine Chapel, this guy with a finger and a white robe and a beard, and sandals, right? Birkenstocks. And he's telling Adam, thou shalt do this. Moses, you shall do that. There's this big booming voice, in the Ten Commandments. But that's not the voice that gives birth to all of our children. Who did all the begetting in the Bible? Who gave birth to all the the 12 brothers and one sister, Dinah? Wasn't the men. The men were there for a very short time. The women did all the work. The women did all the work. And even though feminism has been going on for 50 years now, women still are doing in a lot of families, are not only making all the food, they're also working. It's like you have to do everything inside the house to keep the family together. But you should know, whether it's Reform, Orthodox, or Jew, or conservative, that usually the woman sets the tone for the household, for how they practice Shabbat, how they light candles, what kind of foods are going to have in their menu, if the kids go to Sunday school or not. That's not always the case, because these days are many more gay couples. Both, in a gay female couple, both can be the mothers, right? So that the traditional role is not there, but that's changing a little bit. But we see, that's historically, if you look at the Torah, all the action really takes place when women get involved. The first time when Eve talks to Adam, Adam says, "Okay, God, no, don't worry, we won't eat from that tree." Eve says, whether she's talking to the serpent or whether that's just her hallucination or her dream, she takes some action. She says, "Hey, God says it's a pretty good tree. If we eat from that fruit of the tree of knowledge, we'll get some knowledge." The wife doesn't want to be ignorant. She says, "I want to learn what there is." She didn't say, "I want to be God." I want to learn what there is in the world. Torah doesn't like that. Wanted to keep the woman in her place, and she blames that for the reason they get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. I have to say, folks, getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden was probably a good thing. Not good for Adam and Eve, okay, because they had everything they wanted to eat, and they had a pretty nice life, living, without creating any pollution, living in a nice, natural environment. But they weren't creating anything. They weren't mimicking God. They weren't being like God says is go forth and create, do something with your world. So on the one hand, she motivated them to get out of the Garden of Eden. The next time comes along Sarah. Actually, no, earlier, Noah's wife. Noah's wife is the one responsible for motivating Noah to build the ark and save the animals. The last people who get into the ark after the animals were all safe are Noah's wife and her daughters-in-law, her 3 daughters-in-law. Yeah, they closed the doors. What Noah do? Noah just built the thing, but he didn't organize everything. She motivated him to build this ark over a few years' time. The next time we see Sarah, Sarah is there at the time that God promised. What God promised Abraham? How many kids is he going to have, Abraham? How great is his nation going to be?
The greatest.
Yeah, he's going to have millions of kids, right? Sarah says, "I'm 90 years old. I didn't have any kids yet. I can't have any kids."
What are we starting? What are we starting?
And they talk to Abraham, and now Abraham gets these three men who are maybe angels coming to their tent in the heat of the day. He washes their feet because it's hot sand. And he tells his wife to do what? What does he tell Sarah to go do when he comes in the tent and they have guests? You remember?
Go make something.
Go cook a goat, and they make cheese, and bring butter and meat.
Yeah.
They didn't have it in the refrigerator. He used to go and slaughter an animal and clean it up, and within a day get a complete meal out there in the tent in the shade. Next thing she said, "Look, you're gonna finally have a kid a year from now. And she's in the tent. She overhears this conversation and she laughs. And because she laughed, the word Yitzchak becomes the first son's name, Isaac. So, the next time we see a woman taking control of the situation is where Isaac is old. He can't see too well. He's supposed to give the blessing to his older son, who's a big hunter. And the mother, Rebecca, says, I'm going to make sure that the son that I love, who hangs around the house with me in the tent and he cooks, he makes lentil soup. Jacob is here. I'm going to make sure Jacob gets the blessing instead. So she puts on these hairy, the goat skin, so that she gives him meat just as the other son would prepare. And Isaac said, "Boy, it sounds, you smell and feel like Esau, but you don't sound like Esau." But in any case, he's between his mother and him. Jacob convinced him to give the blessing, and the blessing is given to Jacob. Jacob has 12 kids plus a daughter, 12 sons and a daughter. They eventually have 70 who move down to Egypt. And within a few years, they have 300,000 people living in Egypt, all because of this thing that the mother did to make it happen.
But here, Brian.
Yeah.
So, I didn't even know Jacob had a daughter. So there was no tribe.
Her name is Dinah.
Dinah has no tribe.
She doesn't have a tribe that's part of her heritage. But there's a big story in there about how she was raped by a local prince, a local Canaanite prince named Shem. And because of that, her brothers went in and killed the whole city. So she was redeemed and she was avenged for it, but she's not given her own tribe. But she got her whole chapter of the Torah, though. So anyway, I don't have to give you more examples of feminism, but the people who are leading prayer these days are not the old-fashioned cantors, the old New York or European kind of cantor with the tears streaming down their face, and the black hat with a feather on it. That's not, the prayer is coming from women these days.
So that brings me to a question.
Yeah.
In the movie, the one for last movie night, There Are Jews Here.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the movie, it's a rabbi, and he's talking about taking attendance of the Jewish community, and he says, "Well, we even count the women." What is that? What was that all about?
Well, traditionally, you're not supposed to count women as for the minyan or anything else. It's but that's old-fashioned. About 35 years ago, our synagogue said if we don't count women in our minyan, in our quorum, may as well close the doors. Majority of the people who came to our synagogue, even now when we have it on Zoom, are women. If we were to say women don't count, we may as well close our doors and go do something else. So that's
It shocked me. That's why I asked. It was a shocking statement.
Yeah.
The Torah doesn't say don't count women. The Torah doesn't say it, but the rabbis in the last 2,000 years left women in a role that they weren't allowed to lead services. They couldn't read the Torah. They were put in a role that relegated them where most women were the last 2,000 years. They could have children and make food, but they couldn't do anything of value in the community. They couldn't be leaders. That goes against the Bible, in which we had leaders like Deborah, who was a judge who led the country for 50 years after David died. There are a number of women that give very strong roles in Jewish history, but once the temple was destroyed, you're out in the secular world, and they put a lot of restrictions on behavior. I mean, gay people were stoned to death or hypothetically, we don't know if that really happened, but there wouldn't have been gay marriage until recently, and some groups of Jews would still do not accept gay marriage. I'm working right now with a couple who's going to get married in the next year or two, and they're going to be converting to Judaism first. So anyway, so that's so I wanted to show you that And I'll be glad to send you the link for that. Deborah Sack Mintz is one of the holiest people I've met, and she I could do nothing but play her recordings all night, but
Oh, yeah.
you know, but that's what is prayer? Prayer for different people, you know, for the Orthodox person or somebody who, you know, you grab a prayer book and you spend this whole time doing this silently, you know, and people around, and you're at your own speed, you know, whether you're actually reading the words in the book, don't matter, you're communing with God. An Orthodox person knows all the words in the prayer book by heart. They don't even need the book. So it's kind of a, just in case I forget, or, you know, when they get to a certain page, people are supposed to read it together, like the Shema, like Baruch Hu, the various prayers are supposed to read together. It's good that people are together.
No, Natalie, I'm sorry.
What's that, Eric? Oh, sorry.
I gotta go help Natalie. Hold on.
Okay, sorry. His daughter is such a sweet, beautiful young
Oh,
girl.
I saw her at Tu B'Shvat.
Yeah, she's in our Sunday school and just a wonderful human being. So
Mhm.
he's raising her on his own. He's
Oh my
Wow.
God.
let's find somebody for him. Okay.
Okay.
That's
How old is he?
another class.
Okay.
That's another class. All right. All right. So that was one thing about prayer. So I sent everybody an article.
Yeah.
So I'll pull up the article now on the screen. This is about how to acquire the mental state for prayer. So I thought I'd pull that up. Mental state. And you gotta click on this first. I gotta close her thing. Exit full screen and close that and go to how to acquire the right mental state for prayer. It's an article, by the way, there's this website called My Jewish Learning. It is the best darn website because you can get so much good information from here. You really don't need you know, a rabbi. One thing that's great about Judaism is you don't need a rabbi. A rabbi's a teacher. I'm just a teacher. We say you don't need an intermediary. You can go directly to God, or you go to My Jewish Learning on the way to God. But you don't need to have a rabbi or a priest or somebody in the way. You can make your own decisions. Rabbi will help you with some of the ritual stuff, but so the right mental state. There's this word kavanah. Kavanah means intention or direction, directed intention. That's really what the word means. And this idea of kavanah, it's a Hebrew word. It means really direction, really focusing yourself. So what does this really mean? And it says kavanah means desired focus or directed attention. So it's like a heightened state of mental concentration. And you get that from mindfulness. I like this word mindfulness there. Some of it, has anybody here meditated ever?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I did meditation back in the old days, transcendental meditation. They gave me a word and I concentrated on it. I take yoga downtown here. That's online, of course. I take yoga downtown and online. And with yoga, they have a word or two that you focus on, and you. But all you care, it says, what does it take for you to forget about the other stuff? Look at this quote from the Talmud. This is 2,000 years old. If you're praying, you want to read that paragraph, Michelle?
Where is it starting? I don't see where it starts. If
Oh, this one. Okay, start it again. This word, one should not. Right there, that paragraph with the blue.
okay, and I got to move us down or something. Okay. One should not stand up to pray unless he is in a reverent frame of mind. The original pious ones used to wait a while and then pray in order to direct their hearts toward the omnipresent. While one is reciting Shemona Esrei, even if the king greets him, he should not respond to him And even if a snake is coiled around his heel, he should not cease.
So can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine the focus? The king's coming by with his retinue and his whatever, and you don't bow down to him. Well, in some countries that would be grounds for
Murder for, yeah.
termination, execution. And the snake coiling around your heel because you're so focused on you're carried to another place, and that's what we all want out of prayer. That's what I want out of prayer. I don't know about you guys, but what is spirituality? I mean, it's like I'm walking around saying God is on my shoulder. No, I can go to the top of Granddad's Bluff, not in this weather, but when it's nice out, and look out over 2 miles of river between here and Minnesota, and imagine what it was like 10,000 years ago before all the buildings were there, and all you had up there was a giant river and the trees. And the people looking out over are Native Americans, and they're trapping furs, and they go up there for spiritual enlightenment. There was a place where people went, the highest places always, to get close to God. And to God, God wasn't up in Shemayim, God wasn't in heaven, God was all around them. So, and to feel that, to close their eyes, and that's why what I just showed you in Jewish prayer, as it should be, was how American Indians, North American, Native Americans sang. If most of you know how they're portrayed in movies or something, but if anybody's been to an actual powwow or an actual drumming play, that's what they do. They chant and they sing and they play instruments with a rhythmic, and they reach a rhythm that becomes very internal. The words don't matter. It's how you feel and how you get away from your normal worries about paying the rent and buying food and trapping the next badger, whatever it takes to make your family, because it gets you out of your daily rut and gets you to a higher level. That is what prayer should be. Kavanah, this focused direction inside, maybe deeper inside of yourself. And it also involves breathing. I'll go back to the quote, that article, and you just take some time to read some good stuff in this article. The first thing you should do, you should cause your whole soul to hold fast on while reciting the Shema. The Shema is a prayer we'll look at in a minute. You should empty your mind of everything and pray this way. You should not content yourself with being intent while reciting the first verse of the Shema and saying the blessing. While this has been carried out and practiced consistently for years, cause your soul, whenever you read or listen to the Torah or listen to it, you should be constantly directed and focused. The whole being, all of you and your thought should reflect on what you're listening to or reading. Maimonides was a rabbi about 900 years ago in Spain. Eventually, the Jews got kicked out of that part of Spain. Then he went on to live in Egypt for the latter part of his life in the Jewish community there. He was a doctor, as good as you could be a doctor 1,000 years ago. Didn't have any medicines. But he also wrote some remarkable things. He says, in this passage, Maimonides reveals the depth of commitment required to develop the ideal form of kavanah, the ideal form of concentration. This is not for the faint of heart, he said. Maimonides prescribes a practice that tilts towards nonverbal contemplation as a highest form of worship. It's not memorizing the words. It's not memorizing the songs. It's this inner religious awareness, getting rid of the self-effacement, and a focus on divinity. That's what the aim is. So then a new thing came in about the 12th century called Kabbalah. Most of you have heard of Kabbalah. It just means accepted wisdom, and it's another word for Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah, received wisdom. That's received. It was not a new phenomenon, but the literature started reprinting. And don't forget what happened in the 1400s. The printing press was developed.
Yeah.
Until that time, people had to get a scroll. You want to read something, you had to borrow a scroll from your neighbor. The printing press came in late 1400s, and they were able to transfer this information to many people. And the Kabbalists were very mystical people. The Kabbalists, or those who were learning this Kabbalistic literature, the form of Jewish mysticism, the accepted from one generation to the next, they describe divinity as comprising 10 aspects or rungs, like a ladder. And we're at the bottom of the ladder here on earth, right? Sefirot are the different levels that you have to reach God. I know ladder kind of implies you have to go up. We don't have to go up. We know that God is not up in the heavens somewhere because there's just clouds up there. And also people with harps and wings. Right? No, Judaism doesn't believe in harps and wings. Okay. So the Torah is conceived as a revelation of God's own being. Every word or phrase, even its unwritten vowels and its little notes, the cantillation notes that we use, it signifies one of the levels. This approach makes space for the interpretation of the verse of a Torah as a complex string of Sefirot, complex string of rungs to reach higher levels. So it gets to be in one passage, the Zohar. This is the main work of Kabbalah. It's available in English. It's even online at Amazon. It explains that through the mental act of concentration, your entire being is constituted as a human tabernacle. You are a temple to God. You don't need a priest or Moses or the rabbi. You are prepared to receive the divine overflow. You like that one? The divine overflow.
Divine overflow.
In other words, you have a direct connection to this electricity, to this power. You don't need an intermediary. You don't need, I mean, I hate to say that Christianity had an intermediary, Judaism says you don't need to go direct. Another passage explains that the 248 words of the basic prayer, the Shema, not only correspond to the 248 limbs of the human body, remember the bones of the human body, but with the proper intent, it joins together all the parts of your body, all the bones, all the sinews, all of the ligaments, all the energy and nerves, everything that's in your body is joined as one. One is instructed to avoid any interruption between the blessings for the Shema at the beginning and the whispered, quiet Amida prayer. And in order to join both the masculine and feminine potencies of divinity, that God was not male, talking to male people in the Bible. God has male and female together in one. Kind of like Adam. Remember, Adam was created, and God says, boy, it's not good for man to be alone. What did he do? He split Adam in two. Adam and his wife came from one body. Putting us back together into one, I guess, is a... So let's go on a little bit.
That's very powerful.
It really is. We'll talk more about Hasidism and Hasidim later on, but I wanted to, one of the most basic Hasidic teachings, Hasidim are the really mystical people, is that the entire material world, even the letters of the Torah, the Hebrew letters, and prayer pulsate with divine energy and godly luminosity. Through envisioning the spirituality within each letter of one's prayer, every Hasid, every Jew who becomes prayerful can unite with holiness and participate in bringing unity to the fractured reality they experience. Ecstasy was within reach. What is this ecstasy? Anybody know what the definition of ecstasy might be? Can you think of one?
Total happiness, maybe.
Yes, joy, happiness. Happiness, I think, is emotion. It's temporary, You get a bill in the mail, all of a sudden your happiness goes away.
Mortally divine contentment.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Happiness.
Somebody cuts me off on Losey Boulevard. My happiness goes away. I was driving along, I was real happy. So happiness can be short term. It can be long term. I'd like to. Ecstasy is a higher level. Let's say I go around all the time with this power that I'm connected to all the human beings in our society. That I'm connected to the mountains, to the bluffs and the river that are around me. Instead of this artificial construct of cell phones and computers and electricity, those are all only pretty recent developments. whereas humanity is pretty old development, been around for millions of years, or 5,000 years if you talk to the rabbis. But right, a good Christian and a good rabbi will tell you that the earth is only 5,700 years old. Well, that's I mean, if you take literally the Bible, that's what it is. Doesn't account for millions of years old fossils from dinosaurs or anything like that. That's another discussion. So, oh, Diana said there's a Native American author from the 1800s who wrote about the rituals and practices of his tribe, and every day began for both men and women by going to the river and sitting in the presence of nature and the divine. That is so beautiful. In the Bible, who goes down to the river every day? Pharaoh and his daughter. His daughter, Pharaoh's daughter, goes down to the Nile every day to take a bath. And that's when she found the basket with Moses floating in it. The river is like the source of life. It's in Egypt, of course, it is a source of life. They don't get rain. All the water they get to manage their crops comes from the flooding of the Nile onto the ground, onto the ground of their agricultural land. So that's beautiful. It's a beautiful. The river here, it comes out of a little place called Itasca State Park in northern Minnesota. And you don't know this. I discovered this, that by the time the Mississippi River leaves Minnesota, it's 320 miles long. That it's wound its way is from a little creek in northern Minnesota down to where it joins the St. Croix over in Prescott, and becomes this river about a mile wide. By the time it gets to St. Louis, it's like 3 miles wide, And all of anything that people up north of us in the river dump into the river, we get it here in our water. These days, fortunately, it's all treated before it goes into the. This used to be such a polluted body of water, and it's almost clean enough to drink out of. There was a lot of industrial pollution. 3M used to, in Woodbury, on the river, used to just dump all of its chemicals left over from making Teflon and Scotchgard. It's okay because it's not dumping it in their neighborhood. It comes down to our neighborhood. So anyway, that's all gone. But I want to point out that the river is a very spiritual place. A very spiritual place. Clara, do you have a dog?
Who's got a doggy?
Do you have a doggy, Clara?
I have 2 dogs. Come here.
Dog.
Say
Can
hi.
we see?
Come on, come on.
Can we see your
Come
dog?
on, up. There, look. See them? Mario, Tuku,
Oh.
come.
Oh my God,
Say hi, say hi.
that's right. I forgot. Oh.
Oh, they're adorable. All right, we can spend another lesson on that. So I just want to get back to the idea of spirit. I want you to read this on your own when you get a chance. And the New Age, of course, in the 1960s, had a lot to do with that. Some of you know about crystals and minerals, right? You know that some minerals have power. Do you believe that? I do. When I was growing up, I couldn't afford a transistor radio, but the Boy Scout master gave us each a crystal of germanium. Little crystal, sitting in a little piece of lead. Lead was good in those days. And he put it in a box, a cigar box. People used to smoke cigars. They were bad too. And you used a paper clip to touch the germanium crystal in the right place, and you have these little headphones, and you can hear the loudest nearby radio station. It'd have to be an AM radio station, it'd have to be pretty close, within say 5 miles. And you could press this and find really good reception. And it's amazing. They still have that as a kit you can put together. But germanium, just a little crystal, had this power in it. You didn't need batteries. It was this power. Silicon is like that. We're able to talk today because of the silicon chips located in your computer and in your phone. These are all, these chips, these silicon, which is made from the same thing we make glass from, has tremendous power at the molecular and atomic level. It's unbelievable that the power that's around us, There are other minerals, and some people really get into crystals and how they affect your life. If you watch television, a lot of commercials are about copper. You can get copper for a little wrist. You have a pain in your hands, like carpal tunnel. You wear this copper wrist thing. Some of them are kind of hokey, but copper can have some effect. Remember, copper is the biggest conductor we have. All of our wires in our walls are copper. So that
there you go.
so there's a lot of good things that come from crystal, and it's being in touch with the divine. We'll talk more in another class about the other things that we, mezuzot and other things that have power that can help us focus the divine, focus this power of God to ourselves. I'll just finish up this this article with this idea that kavanah is the most important thing. Whatever you do, if you're making artwork, Clara, if you're making pottery like Bob Friedland does, if I'm kayaking down the La Crosse River, you need to focus on what you're doing. You have to be present in your mind, not thinking of something else somewhere else. Be in the moment. Judaism believes so much that prayer is about being in the moment, listening to your heart and your mind and the world around you, and getting the heck away from all this electronic and technology stuff. Make sense?
Mhm.
All right. So I just wanted don't mean to preach, but that's what I do as a rabbi.
Right.
Okay, mental state for prayer. I wanted to talk a little bit about truth. I want to talk about truth for a minute. So I want to wait for Eric to get back. Eric, you coming back? Eric. All right. I'll just Eric, you coming back?
Yeah, come on. I'm trying to find something.
Okay. I'm going to pull up the next thing.
There it is.
Okay. So I want to show you this, and then I want you to, on your own, I'll send you the link for this also. This website is incredible. It's called Jewish Institute for Jewish Spirituality. And they give you for free, you get a starter kit about meditation. Shalom and welcome. If you're new to meditation, you can download the instructions. There's actually a text of practice here, and then there's the recordings on this website. Here's an example. This is Rabbi Feinsmith in New York talking about using your breath to anchor your focus.
Welcome to this introductory breath.
Make sure you can get that. Make sure you can hear that. I'm sorry. You always have to click on share sound. Okay.
I think I broke my tailbone, so I keep moving around.
Oh, we have a cure for that.
Okay? You're
Yeah.
serious, Eric?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
That
painful.
forces you not to sit. Okay. This is Rabbi Feinsmith on breathing.
Anchor guided meditation. I'm Rabbi Sam Feinsmith, and I'm going to lead you through it. After 3 minutes of guided meditation, I'll invite you into a 5-minute period of silence. Choose a space where you can remain uninterrupted for the next several minutes. Please silence your phone, close the door, and settle into a seated posture that allows you to be comfortable but upright.
Anyway, you get the idea. They actually will talk you through meditation, and it's free. You don't have to send any money away. And it talks about Jewish prayer, but it starts out really, how are you breathing? Take a deep breath. You have to stop and not just people, in the older days, maybe 200 years ago and more, Jewish people wouldn't pray unless they sat down for a few minutes first and just breathed instead. Coming in from the outside world, from work or traffic, whatever, you can't just jump into praying. You got to sit down and close your eyes and take some deep breaths. Think about what's really important, why you're in that space, either at home or in the synagogue. You can't be thinking of other things. This is time for yourself. That was the hardest thing I had with meditation. Doing transcendental meditation, I had to find 20 minutes I could sit alone every day. The idea is you have to make it, just like these days with exercise. You have to make it part of your schedule, right?
I met some people who used to be really into TM, and they couldn't make a decision unless they went to go sit in a corner somewhere and said, I need to meditate.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny.
Yeah. Okay. So that was one thing I was wanted to show you. Institute for Jewish Spirituality. Beautiful resource. Here's another one I want to share with you. This is one of my favorites, go-to places for me. And let me pull it up here on the screen. Close that one and go there. This is what's great about YouTube. You get some really great clips in YouTube that apply to Jewish prayer. So I'll bring that up here. Here's one of my favorites, which is where is it? Let's see. Get it back on my screen here. Okay, bring it up here. Share screen. And where is it? Oh, here it is. This is my favorite guru.
Come on. Let's do something that really cooks. Something that cooks. All right, this is an oldie, but well, it's an oldie where I come from. All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
Way down in Louisiana, down in New Orleans, way back up in the woods among the evergreens, there stood a log cabin made of earth and wood, where lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well. He could play the guitar just like he's ringing a bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go. George, where you let out big? Nice going.
George, you ever think of running for president?
Johnny be good. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go. Go, Johnny, go, go, go. Johnny be good.
John, it's Marvin. Your cousin, Marvin Berry. You know that new sound you looking for? Well, listen to this.
And what was that?
Back to the
All right.
Future, right?
Yeah, Back to the Future. The idea is that I know you ask me, what does it have to do with Jewish spirituality? It has to be one of my favorite scenes. But you should know that this young man, now they had him at 17 years old in the movie. He was already 24 years old when he played in Spin City, in his TV show. And that's what he was doing this. And he learned the guitar for this part. He did not play guitar before he went to start this movie. But anyway, I digress. So, I say YouTube, you can get trapped in something and then spend the rest of your days in it. So I want to pull up the other clip I wanted to show you. Here and go to there and click on that. And this is a Jewish one here. Share screen. There it is. Can you see that? I just want to make sure you can get the sound. Share screen and sound. Good. This is Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments, the movie.
From the burning bush, O Lord, you charged me to bring the people to this holy mountain, to behold your glory and receive your law. What have I left undone?
This is before they had computers. This is not CGI. This is special effects done by hand. They've said in the Torah, this is written by the finger of God. You know, God was carving this in the stones. Looks like lasers to me, doesn't it? Is that like lasers today?
And they overlaid the image with pure gold, and Aaron fashioned it and smoothed it with the hammer, ready to be graven by cunning art and man's device. And he fastened it with nails, that it should not move. And he that smote the anvil did beat the molten gold into thin plates, for they had gathered their treasure into the midst of the furnace, and did blow the fire upon it to melt it. And they adorned themselves in rich apparel and costly array, with veils of blue and purple and scarlet, and fine twined linen wrought in Egypt. And the women tread grapes from Midian into new wine.
What's making the women work?
Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor thy father and thy mother.
And the people sinned a great sin, for they had made them a god of gold. And they bore him upon their shoulders and rejoiced, saying, This be our God, O Israel.
Are you mourners of Moses afraid to face the new God of gold?
They were as children who had lost their faith. They were perverse and crooked and rebellious against God. They did eat the bread of wickedness and drank the wine of violence, and they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And the people cried, The graven image hath brought us joy. And they worshipped the golden calf and sacrificed unto it.
Here is your sacrifice.
Meanwhile,
Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. anything that is thy neighbor.
All right, you get the idea. So let me turn it. It's still going. Hold on. There we go. So what are your thoughts?
You know,
What
I
exactly is the definition of covet?
Oh, covet means desire. It's just an old fashioned. That word didn't exist in the Torah. Covet was the 16th century King James version of the Bible. In Hebrew, it says desire. You shall not desire your neighbor's wife, his house, his possessions. You're not supposed to desire. When people have said, "Boy, what's the difference between stealing and desiring?" You know, let's say you're at home today, and you see the UPS truck deliver a large screen TV to at your neighbor's garage door. Your neighbor's not home today; he's at work, or he's somewhere else. And you know they're not going to be home for a couple hours. You know that if you accidentally put that big screen TV in your basement, you know it's going to be covered by insurance. UPS will pay for it. You know, he's got homeowners, whatever. Nobody's going to lose anything if you put that in your own basement. Well, even the thought of doing it, you see, you wouldn't actually do something bad if you didn't think about it first. That's what the implication is. Now, some people will do things spontaneously that are bad. Others think about it. Let's see, I might rob the convenience store. I really need some money, and they think about it first before doing it. They think about how they're going to get away. Some people don't think that far away. They won't notice. I'm working in my office. They won't notice if I move $1 million from the client's account to my account. Nobody's really paying attention. The idea of even thinking of doing it. So God doesn't say don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. He says don't even think about doing it. God says don't do those things. Don't even think about doing those things, because desire is in your mind. How can you control how somebody thinks about something? It just says when you're going to start thinking about doing something wrong, even if it's saying something nasty to somebody or throwing the finger at them as they speed past you. As you're driving on Losey Boulevard, you're going 25 and the guy next to you is going like this. You could do it back. That's what happened to me the other day. I didn't give it back to him. He was in a hurry. I was going 35, I think, to another place where it was like 40 or 45, and he was going like 60, and I was in the right lane, but he was didn't want to change lanes. So, I had to make a choice. I had to think about what's the right thing to do. My first reaction would have been to cut him off and slam on the brakes, like you're supposed to do when you have road road rage. What? Isn't that what we're Americans? We have the freedom of our, control. We don't have to wear a mask if we don't want to, damn it. And we are going to stop the guy who cut me off because I'm going to cut him off and slam on the brakes, not realizing the person behind him might get killed if I slam on the brakes and he hits me. People don't think about the repercussions of what they do. That's all that. Now, these people are obviously doing some bad things we just saw, right? One of the commandments was you shall have no other gods before me. So Moses is up on the mountain getting this law. And what are the people doing, Diana? What are they doing there in the valley?
They're being a little naughty.
A little. They're breaking almost every rule that God is giving Moses upstairs,
They didn't just think about it, they did it.
Yeah, adultery, worshiping other gods, it was the 1960s, so they couldn't show a lot of, it wasn't. But the idea was that this is a true story, as the Bible story tells. Now, if you believe that there's any truth to the Bible, so what is truth? How do I have any proof that what the Torah, that we have today, this Torah, how do we have any proof that this really, was there or matters? So that's the question is, how are Jews still around after 2,000 years? Actually, 4,000 from the beginning. But why are Jews still around? We don't need Jews anymore. We make our own rules. We Romans, we Greeks, we Persians, we Egyptians, we Babylonians. We have a great, thing going here. And nobody can tell us how to behave. Nobody can tell us what sin is. We are, when those people are all gone. And the Jews are still around. Not very big. The Jews are only 14 million people in the world today, as opposed to 3 billion Muslims and 2 billion Catholics, or Christians. So, what is truth? So for me, the fact that we've carried this darn book with us for 3,000 years, that's kind of truthy to me. To use a truthiness as an implication of something that's true. What is truth? Now, you can sometimes feel the truth when you're connected to God, and Clara before talked about it as joy. Some people consider that joy comes from within yourself. When you feel joy and connection to something larger than yourself, that's proof to me of God's existence. When I get tingles in my arms and legs when I hear these people praying, it's just saying some words on the screen, that I'd have this kind of feeling that I'm connected to something higher than myself. It's unbelievable. It's amazing to me. What kind of proof do you want? All right, here, I got a proof. I have another thing I'll show you. Here's proof. I love this because you say there's different kinds of proofs out there, but I'll pull this one up. Let's see, where is it? It's a wall here. That's a good one right here. Where's my picture? Here it is.
If you're not ready for the truth, it can certainly make you lose your mind, that's for sure.
All right. There I am in Jerusalem in January, exactly a year ago. I went to Israel to visit to see my son's family. My grandson was having his bar mitzvah. And, I went for a little trip to this bunch of rocks over here. This is the wall, of course, the Western Wall in Jerusalem, the wall that was a retaining wall of the original Holy Temple, which is the Temple Mount, where the Holy Temple was before the Romans destroyed it. Now there's a mosque at the top of it, but the rocks that I'm praying at are at least 2,000, probably 2,500 years old. The one right in front of me was constructed by, and the one below that came from King Herod, the last of the Jewish kings, the last of the Maccabees, and during his 20-year tenure, he built Masada, his beautiful fortress and resort on the Dead Sea, and he also built this retaining wall all around the mountain, the Holy Mount. And so these are very old stones. And you see the little scraps of paper in the wall?
Mm-hmm.
What are they for? Why do people put scraps of paper in the wall?
I know.
Yeah, please.
Wishes or things that things that you want to leave, not really for God, but maybe to tell God. You put your secrets and things like that in there.
Yeah, private thoughts, private prayers, maybe special requests. My kid wants to go to Stanford. I need 60,000 a year. My rent is due next month. I could use another $2,000. You think God's actually reading these little pieces of paper? Well, first of all, God is all around us. God sees you writing the piece of paper in the first place. I think these pieces of paper for the people who put them in there more than they are for God. Hope. There's another movie that I love is The Shawshank Redemption. It's based on a Stephen King book, and it's where Morgan Freeman and Tim Robbins are stuck in prison together. Anybody seen that movie? He said,
I have. It's beautiful.
We'll show clips
Is
another
it
time.
really?
Oh,
Yeah,
it's awesome.
It's a beautiful. It's about redemption, because Shawshank Redemption. It's about getting, but how he carries this hope, And one of the guys in the prison yard says, you know, hope is a dangerous thing in here. You shouldn't have hope. It's going to kill you. You know, and to abandon hope goes back to a phrase from the Greek, in which Catholic theology includes, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Where do you think that sign is? Abandon all hope, you who enter here.
Well, the first thing I thought of was a concentration camp, but
Well, that's excellent, because that's hell on earth. Hell, in both the Latin and Greek, there's a big sign over the entrance that says, abandon all hope, you who enter here. And
I didn't say it, but I was thinking hell in my head.
yes, when you abandon hope, you're creating a hell for yourself. Hope is, I mean, you got to be optimistic. I'm 69 years old. I'm marrying a 65-year-old woman. Is that optimistic? She thinks I may be around long enough to give her a good life. That's folks, that is hope. That is hope, you know. How do you define hope? You know, we try to wear double masks, and sanitize our hands every time we come in or out of the house, or go to the supermarket. But there's always one little chance you cannot do it at the right place or the right time, and a little droplet will get in your nose or your mouth or your eyes, and you're dead. So that's hope, isn't it? Hope is what my daughter does. She's taking the advanced placement exams right now for next year, and she's also taking her SAT, the first SAT, PSAT. She's nothing but hope is carrying her through that period. Judaism is about hope. It says you're not going to hell because you're going to find a way to improve your life now. Now, Judaism also doesn't believe in a hell where you're punished and burned or your skin is peeled off and put on again. We don't get that, because Judaism has suffered that during lifetime. Jews have been tortured and burned and killed and maimed during their lifetime, from the Crusades to the Holocaust to the Inquisition, for thousands of years, and only for one reason. Well, the other reason was we killed somebody else's God. But other than that, we're carrying a message that some people don't want to hear. Hitler, may his name be erased, Yamach Shemo. Hitler wrote his thesis, his plans for his life, when he was in prison in 1924. Hitler, before he came to power, the Nazi Party came to power. In 1924, they tried to take over the local city of Munich. From there, they'd be able to control a whole state of Germany. The local police and army shot most of those people down. Hitler and a couple of his guys were put in prison for a year. And while he was in prison, he wrote this manifesto called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. And it was a long-winded thing, but it basically said, the Jews are the conscience of the world. They have a message for us that we have to listen to God. We don't need that anymore. We, the perfect German Aryan people, don't need that anymore. We are the conscience of the world now. That was a belief of the Nazi Party, and that became the belief of the German people, is that we have a destiny that is greater than the people around us. Yes, he said, we don't need the Jews anymore. The Jews are carrying this old book, this old book that has all this stuff in there. Don't kill, don't steal, be nice to your neighbor. We don't need that crap anymore. We're the master race. We don't need those rules anymore. Hitler was just not alone. Hitler was one of many tyrants over the years. Russia, Stalin killed many more people than the Nazis did. Stalin killed almost 50 million people over his reign from the 30s to the 50s. But he's not known as well as the Nazis were. But all of these autocrats, these dictators, feel that they are God, that they have the right to take life from people or control people's existence. Sometimes they run for president. No, I'm sorry. Anyway, I didn't say that. I'll take that off the recording later. So that's been the message. The Jews carry this darn message with them. The Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, which says you should treat your neighbor as good as you treat yourself. You know, just because a neighbor next to you doesn't shovel his walk, maybe you one day you'll shovel his walk for him. Maybe it's too cold or it's too icy. I had a neighbor who always mowed my side of the house on the lawn. He always mowed the lawn on my side of instead of just halfway, he always mowed the whole thing. I never complained to him. And one day I thanked him for it. He said, "It's my pleasure. I'm already out there. I love being out in the grass. We only get, summer for 3 months of the year." He was enjoying doing it. I'm going to get in his way of his enjoyment, But these autocrats, these dictators feel they don't need a conscience. They don't need morals and ethics. They make their own rules. Sound familiar? No. They make their own rules. And that's what Hitler was the first one to actually tell anybody about. You're supposed to keep all these dictator things to yourself. He actually said, we don't have to follow Jewish Christian law anymore. Judeo-Christian rules don't apply to us. We're higher than that. We can choose who lives or dies. We can choose who are the master race and who is inferior. Jews weren't alone. They killed millions of Russians and Polish people during World War II. They felt that the Polish should be subjugated as slaves and the Russians should be killed because they're communists. Unbelievable. So that's the burden. Now, what am I saying about truth? We've been carrying this damn message with us for thousands of years, and we won't get rid of it, Why are we still carrying this Torah with us? Why are we still carrying this message with us? It said when God chose the Jewish people. Have you heard the story about why God chose the Jewish people to get the Ten Commandments? Everybody remember that story?
I don't
First, God went to the let's say the Amalekites, or Canaanites, and he said, the Canaanites says, I have commandments for you, and the Canaanites said, well, tell us one of the commandments, and the Canaanites said, and God said, thou shalt not kill, and of course the Canaanites said, we live by killing, we kill our neighbors, we kill other countries, we don't care, we don't want your commandments. All right, then he goes to the Egyptians, and he says to the Egyptians, I've got 10 commandments to give. And the Egyptians say, well, give us an example. One of the commandments is, thou shalt not steal. And the Egyptians say, well, we steal from our neighbors. We steal from other countries. We live by stealing. We don't want your commandments. Goes to Moses. Says, Moses, I've got a commandment for you. Moses says, how much are they? God says, they're free. Moses says, give me 10. That's not quite how it happened.
Moses asked for it.
What's that?
Moses asked for it.
Yeah. No, the idea is, it says throughout the Bible, especially the area where they're traveling in the desert. We're going to get into that in the next few weeks in the Torah reading. They've gotten out of Egypt. All the plagues are over. They get the 10 Commandments, and they have to wander for another 40 years. Folks, to get from Egypt to Israel is only 2 weeks by camel at most. With a good Jeep, it's only about 18 hours going over a rocky road. They don't have a major highway. There are tour buses that do it now in about 24 hours. It took them 40 years to cross the Sinai. They couldn't go direct. The Philistines were in the way. The Philistines lived on the coast. They were going to certainly attack and steal and kill from the Israelites. They had to take a way that wandered through the desert. There's another reason God made them wander through the desert was God wanted the previous generation to die off. He wanted this people who'd been slaves to forget about their slave mentality and have their children and grandchildren who didn't know slavery as free people to start a new country, to start a new nation. So that happened throughout the Bible. In this whole next section, God says, these people are stiff-necked and stubborn. And Moses says, I can't lead these people. At least 4 times in the Torah, Moses says, please, I don't want to do this job anymore. In fact, he said it at the burning bush. I don't want this job. Those Israelites are stubborn. They don't listen to anybody. They don't listen to me. Well, you know something? They didn't listen, but they've kept this message with them. Well, God knew you need a stubborn people like the Jews who are going to be stuck with carrying this message from one generation to the next. And you know, the Nazis burned millions of Jewish books. The auto da fe of the Inquisition between 1400s and 1800s, both in the United States and in South America. A lot of people don't know the Inquisition not just took place in Europe, it also took place in South and Central America, that Jewish books were burned, Jews who refused to convert to Catholicism were burned at the stake. And it was not a good time for Jewish people. But the Inquisition burned also thousands of Torahs and Talmuds. And you know something? It's still around. You know, you go to most synagogues, they have a couple of Torahs in their ark, you know, sitting in there. Even though the things have been burned, somebody still had some. So I talk about proof. How do you know about the proof of these things? Well, I went to the Science Museum in St. Paul. Anybody know that's the Science Museum in St. Paul? And they got a beautiful. Every year they have different exhibitions. One of them was the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were brought to the. Just a few samples were brought from Israel and going around the country, being seen by people. First of all, a lot of church groups, Christian church groups wanted to see the Dead Sea Scrolls because they were written at the time of the Essenes. The sects that were of early Christians were also studying Torah. It's all written by hand. And so all around the country. And when I went to St. Paul 3 times to this museum over a period of weeks, they were filled with hundreds of church groups and Sunday school kids seeing the scrolls of the Bible written 2,000 years ago. These are actual pieces, not something from the Torahs from 1,000 years ago. These are 2,400, 2,500 years old. They've been carbon dated, so the radiation shows these are real. And what's even more amazing is the words that are in those scrolls that were found inside of pottery in 1948 are exactly the same words that are written on our Torah scrolls in our ark, in our synagogue. The word for word, they're written by scribes, a generation of scribes writing the same words in those scrolls that are in our scrolls in our synagogue. Unbelievable that the scribes, who were kind of a cult or a guild, always a father and son teaching each other how to write in Hebrew. If they made a mistake, they threw out the page and wrote a new one. These are almost flawlessly the same as I could go up to the wall in St. Paul and read behind the glass all the words from Isaiah. The entire book of Isaiah is there, for example, and the book of Esther. These were written in Hebrew at the time. It's the same Hebrew words we use today. It just floored me. I said, wait a second. So when I went to Israel a year ago in January, I went to the Shrine of the Book, this beautiful round museum. And inside, protected by air and light, are the entire Dead Sea Scrolls, all 2,000 pages of them. And they are being studied. They're all been copied, of course, and they're electronic. You can look at them online. Some are little pieces of parchment. Others, they pieced them together using the computer so that they are actual full pages. Some of them were in excellent condition. They've been kept in this cave for about 1,900 years before a shepherd boy discovered them in 1948. And they've been studied by Jewish scholars and Christian scholars all over the world. These are proof that people at least had the same book 2,000 years ago. So what more proof do you need? I had this wall I went to. I showed you the picture. It's the same place, been there 2,000 years. Then I got this. Then I've got these scrolls, which is written by people. People are fallible. Well, this stuff was identical to the stuff we read today every week in the Torah. That really blew me away. And so, the skeptic that I was, I all of a sudden say, hey, maybe this stuff is real. It's not just some stuff they made up a couple of years ago to get people to believe something. It's a message. I mean, the stories are nice, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, the stories are nice. And they say things about how people should behave with each other and how the people act. There's a lot of bad things in the Torah. People are not nice to each other. God destroys various nations. Adam's son, um, who killed Cain, kills his brother Abel. Happens from the very beginning. They're murdering each other. They're not being nice to each other. But it's a fallible book. It shows real human emotion. The most powerful thing I see in the Torah is when Joseph reunites with his brothers, he cries. He holds his as we read this 2 weeks ago, he puts his arms around his brother and he cries on his neck, and they cry with each other for a long time. And the people hear their sobs all over the palace, in Pharaoh's palace. It was such a human moment that this in this Bible, this thing that should be so far away from us, so hard to comprehend. And these are real stories of real humanity, of real people.
Stories of real imperfection.
Yes. You see, usually when people write a book like the Mein Kampf that Hitler did, you're writing about victory over everything. You don't have no weaknesses, you have no flaws. The Bible carries a lot of people with flaws and weaknesses and mistakes. That means, to me, that tells a lot more truth than something that would just be written by the victors. Here it's written by the victims. Anyway, but about biblical truth, I'll tell you next week. We'll study that a little bit more. But I thought you should know a little bit about where we seek truth, and you'll have to determine for yourself what the truth is and what these things mean. There's an article that I gave you that I attached. Is there a proof that the Torah is true? You want to look at that. It's a really good one, a good article. What I want to finish up with today is before we go into the Hebrew, is a little discussion about the different groups of Jews. Anybody have any questions, by the way, before we go on? Yeah, Eric?
I just, my imperfections of life are, and maybe it's the same for everybody, I don't know, very glaring. It's like, come to a point where the imperfections, it's like, I'll show you this picture. I don't know if you can see it or not. So it's like, kind of like an hourglass, right?
Yeah.
At the very bottom here, it says, self-created foundation of disconnectedness. And then you can either choose to stay in that. It's kind of where I was. And then there's the bottlenecks. It's like all the imperfection and bad choices just kind of start to just creep, just pressure you right into this little funnel. And then you get shot out into the top, which I labeled mortality and divine contentment. And it's like, the lessons of imperfection are so painful, but yet so valuable. And when you mentioned getting through the imperfection of being human and choice and the 10 commandments and the things we can be guided through to make that choice. But in the end, those imperfections will hopefully, there's hope, will bring us all together to the point where we can cry on each other's shoulder and say, hey, I love you. We made it through this together. You know what I mean? It's just amazing.
Yes. You've got it. You get an A for today's class. Thank you. Hey. That's beautiful. Also, Diana wrote some beautiful stuff in the chat. She said she'd been reading about the women in the life of Moses, and every turn in his life, women were there protecting or guiding, initiating something. The Jewish midwives, remember, they were supposed to kill all the Jewish babies, right? They allowed Shifra and Puah. They actually were named in the Torah. These two Jewish midwives protected Moses and other Jewish babies. Yocheved, his mother, Batya, Pharaoh's daughter, who discovered the baby floating in the river. Miriam, his sister, who came right up to her and said, "Hey, I can find somebody to nurse this baby." So these are all vital to Moshe's life. He didn't do it himself. Saying I did it myself without support of 40 other women in my life, is kind of crazy. But and the Torah does, everybody says women aren't mentioned in the Torah. These women are all mentioned. They're actually in there. So it'd be wrong to say it was a patriarchal kind of system where we talk about the the patriarchs and not worry about the matriarchs. Women were so influential, and especially in the book of Exodus, they're given so much credit for these things. Okay, the other thing she mentioned is a Native American author from the 1800s who wrote about the rituals and practices of his tribe. And every day began for both men and women by going to the river and sitting in the presence of nature and the divine. And for me, it's water. When Michelle and I went kayaking down the La Crosse River, I mean, it was beautiful because we were two members of the congregation bonding with each other and getting to know each other better. And she was always like, 100 feet ahead of me. I was kind of, a little tentative and scared. It wasn't a big current or anything, but even though we were right in an urban area, I felt so at peace and so separated from this big industrial society we're surrounding us. It's just amazing. Now, eventually we ended up at the Mississippi and all the buildings that are downtown, but it was timeless. That you can put in a couple of miles from downtown and be separated from all. I think it's so wonderful. You haven't, like, in some cities they actually put paving over these and and concrete, and you don't see these smaller creeks and rivers. My next one is to go on the Black River. I understand it's pretty exciting as well. So anyway, but that's the idea, is to get to the water is where we come from. We come from the water. Of course, we come from earth, right? Adam's name means earth, Adamah. But without water, we're nowhere. Our life is nothing without water. We need water, and we need the idea of, or scientists will tell you that all life came from the ocean, right? It was DNA matched together in the waters, and eventually ended up as tadpoles, and had legs, and then walked on land, and climbed up into the trees. By the way, a lot of people feel leaving the trees was a big mistake for us, but should have stayed up in the trees, because it's been downhill ever since. But like I talked to my chiropractor, I'll be seeing him Wednesday again. He said, Brian, we were made not for walking on two legs. We were made for walking on all fours. It puts all this pressure on the back. If you're an animal, you don't have that problem. You're walking on all fours. I might go back to that. So, but water is, the connection with water is so important. And in my life, I always wanted to be near a river, and boating, fishing, swimming. It's such a big theme. So that was I wanted to share that. So let me just share this last item with you. Is modern denominations of Judaism. Anybody besides Michelle? Can anybody tell me some of the other ones besides Orthodox?
I wrote some down.
Yeah, Diana or Eric or Clara?
Conservative,
Conservative,
reform. And there's one more main.
A couple of. So here's.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeshivish.
Yeshivish.
Yeah.
Well, yeshivas is part of Orthodox Judaism. So Orthodox Judaism was always called mainstream Judaism. This is a belief that divine law, the Torah, was directly revealed by God. It's internal, it's unchanging, it's the only guide for your life. You have to carefully and strictly observe the commandments as the direct will of God. And the ultra-Orthodox also say you have to be not involved with people in the outside society. You have to, like the Amish or other organizations, you must be separated from the real world. Then you have Hasidim. We talked a little bit about Hasidism. These are the mystics starting in about the 16 and 1700s, and they dressed today as they wore these clothes in Europe over the last few hundred years. And different sections of these Hasidim use different clothing. These are, the one on the right is called a shtreimel. It's a hat made of beaver. Can you imagine wearing this during the summer in Israel? Not really effective, but it covers a lot of the head. It's the biggest yarmulke you'll ever see. But by dressing like this, they wanted to maintain you know how Amish people dress? Anybody see Amish people in the supermarket or something?
Yeah.
The men will wear very like black clothing or suspenders and very austere. The women wear like Orthodox Jews. They're usually their ankles and their arms are covered. And they have a head up in some type of container or in a bonnet. So it's then as a
Did you say
reaction to
there
this.
were a form of Judaism where actually there were Jews who believed that Jesus was existent?
Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's called Messianic Judaism.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It used to be called Jews for Jesus, which was a way to attract and convert Jews to Christianity. It's no longer called Jews for Jesus. It's called Messianic Judaism, and it's basically it's Christianity. So
Yeah, I mean,
okay. Next group is called Reform Judaism, as a reaction to before all this, there was only one kind of thing. There was only Orthodox. There was nothing else for thousands of years until the 1800s, when all the other countries were getting emancipated. France, Germany, they were all getting rights of the individual and becoming citizens. Jews wanted a piece of that action too. So the first thing the Jews said, wait a second, let's stop wearing yarmulkes. Let's be like the Germans around us. Let's be good Germans. Let's have our services on Sundays. Let's have big pipe organs in our synagogues.
Was that conservative?
That's called reform. It was a reaction. They were reforming. They're changing the basic. So that came out only about 200 years ago. And they said, God didn't write the Torah. The Torah was written by divinely inspired people. Divinely inspired. Can you see that on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. And modern worship, instead of Hebrew anymore, which has gone for thousands of years, did just fine. They changed it into whatever your local language was. All the books were written in German. The prayer books were written in French or English, whatever country you're in. That's what they believe, and that held for quite a while. So maybe 25 to 40% of Jews got rid of the old clothes and dressed like Germans and went to synagogue on Sunday, and really became good Germans, good French people, good English people. As a reaction, some of the people said, wait a second, you've gone too far. So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the conservative movement said, wait a second, we got to start a new organization that we don't want to be totally Orthodox anymore, but we don't want to be, totally assimilated into the side. We want to still maintain a lot of their things. So it says we want to agree change is necessary, but reform had eliminated too many basic practices. No kippah, no prayer shawl, no talit. They got rid of a lot of stuff that people. The kosher laws were the biggest one. The reform movement said you can eat pork, you can eat lobster and shellfish. The conservative people said no. Let's keep some of these nice. They're tradition. That's why I put Fiddler on the Roof on there, because Fiddler on the Roof is pretty much the tradition, right? That's the the page isn't there anymore. Okay. So you know the song Tradition from that the tradition. We can show that another time. The idea is you keep tradition, but you can have some change too. It's okay. One of the things were women being allowed to be part of the congregation, to belong to the board of directors, to sit up on the bima and read Torah, and also to be rabbis. I met the first female rabbi in the United States, Sally Price, and she's now only 68 years old. So she was only a rabbi for the last 40 years. That's how recent America really saw a female being a rabbi. What a big, such a big deal. Now, 25% of all rabbis and 40% of all cantors in the U.S. are women. So the conservative movement was kind of a response to go reform. They went too far. The conservative movement. Now, the conservative movement since then has dwindled tremendously. These were people who wanted to maintain practices, but they have disappeared. The conservative movement has closed down a lot of synagogues, and many of those people have gone to reform, or Nothing. They've decided not to affiliate with the Jewish community, but Reform is picked up tremendously, where now Reform is probably 50 or 60% of American Jews are Reform Jews. Then in the 1920s, you had a guy who said, wait a second, this stuff is all hogwash. Judaism is not a religion. Judaism should be it's a civilization. It's a people. It's a culture, a faith community. I'll tell you what. Let's have a new religion. Mordecai Kaplan was a rabbi that started this in 1920. He said, wait a second. Let's have a religion where God is not the center. People are the center. In other words, this is Judaism, which is not centered on God. It's centered on people. That goes over well with some people. Don't want to believe in God. They can be atheists, but still be Reconstructionist Jews. Right? They're not real popular, but there are maybe a couple of hundred synagogues in the world that are Reconstructionists now. Not a large group, but again, it allows another place for people who felt the Reform is too far off. The Orthodox believe God is in charge of everything. I don't believe in God so much anymore. I'm going to join a Reconstructionist synagogue. So there's room for everybody, you see, in the Jewish community. So one thing that's common to all of Judaism, that, and not all, to different degrees, is one of them is to accept Torah, to say the Torah is real, and we have to follow the mitzvot, the commandments of the Torah. We have to be good to animals. If we see an animal suffering in pain, we have to alleviate their pain. We have to help them, take them to a vet, pick them up and help them out of the ditch if we see an animal in a ditch. If we see a lost animal, we have to return it to its owner. If we see a lost article, we have to find out who owns it. We can't just claim it finders keepers. Finders keepers is not a Jewish law. So, to follow the ethics of Judaism. Also Judaism believes we should follow some of these rituals and these various holidays, these observances, to follow Shabbat to some extent. They all believe in giving money to Jewish causes, to the Red Cross of Israel, Magen David Adom, to give money to the poor, to give money to the food shelf, to be a devoted member, show up regularly, and also be connected to Israel, to the Holy Land. Give money, visit Israel, feel a connection to Jewish history, and to be committed to the creative survival of the Jewish people. So these are some things that all Jews have in common, regardless of which group they're part of. Any questions about that? Too fast? I hope it wasn't too fast. I want to show you one more thing, then we'll let you go. This is our on our website. This is really important. I want you to get to use this regularly. I put a lot of information on our website, so I'll pull it up here. And it's lacrossesynagogue.org. And on here, I always update the front picture. This is a picture of the Tu B'Shvat table for our Seder last year. Michelle was very instrumental in putting together a beautiful celebration of Tu B'Shvat last year. And you can see this is a time of year when, while we have a lot of snow on our trees, the trees of Israel are starting to bloom. And in Israel, you start seeing, kiwi. We don't see kiwi in Israel so much, but peanuts and walnuts and bananas and pomegranates and dates and almonds and raisins and plums and pears, and all these things are produce of the state of Israel. And we celebrate them with song and with some blessings. So all the holidays are in our website. If you go across the top, under worship, I have Shabbat and holidays. In fact, under Jewish life, I do have information about conversion, Jews by choice, we call it, social action, being involved in the community. We have a film festival in there and learning opportunities. But anyways, lots going on here. Worship, the holidays are all listed here in order that they happen throughout the year. We've already talked about Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I want to talk for just a couple of minutes about Tu B'Shvat, the 15th of the month of Shabbat, which happened last Thursday. And Tu B'Shvat is celebrated by getting together and eating these fruits. Now we did it online because we can't get together because of the pandemic. I made sure all the families that participated had some of these things on their plate at home, and then we could do the things together. There's other customs is to plant trees in Israel. In Israel, they planted over 250 million trees in the last 100 years in Israel. That's incredible to me. You should know how many trees have burned in the fires of California in the last 5 years. Anybody have an idea?
Probably millions.
250 million. The same number of trees they planted in Israel in 100 years, California fires have burned in the last 5. Tragic. Fruits in the Tu B'Shvat Seder, and this is me planting a tree in Israel a year ago. In January, it was like 60 degrees out, and it's planting a tree. It's very little tree. If I go back now, it's going to be 6 feet tall. No, it won't be 6 feet tall. But, so that's a mitzvah. Growing up as kids, we always saved money every month. We put a quarter in a card or in a box to save money to plant a tree in Israel. In the old days, it was only $2.50. These days, it costs $18 to have a tree planted in Israel in your name. I do expect to go back there and see a big plaque in front of the tree in a few years saying Brian Searle's tree. The plaque would cost another $18. So there's a lot of stuff in here about the holidays. So when you get a chance, look at this, things about Shabbat. Each holiday has its own page. Like, of course, you'd recognize if I clicked on Hanukkah. This is actual three kids in our synagogue who took home the goodie bag that I gave them for Hanukkah, and they were able to light the candles at home and say the prayers and spin the dreidels. And it was, so we have a lot of things here about the holidays, what the rules are. All I want you to know about holidays is kind of what time of the year do they happen. You know, Hanukkah always happens in the winter. Tu B'Shvat always happens in January or so when it's miserably cold here and warm in Israel. Passover is always a spring holiday. So you know what time of the year, and also what they celebrate and why we're doing it, and also what foods we eat during each holiday has its own special foods. So Tu B'Shvat is a very special time because even though things are kind of crummy here in nature, though I love snow myself, is that you can appreciate that things are taking place in the Holy Land. It keeps you connected to an ancient agricultural religion as well as connected to the land of Israel. So that's it about holidays. So please explore our website. Is put a lot of stuff on there. We have a cookbook on there too as well. We put our cookbook, which is not dietetic, by the way. There's some good things on cakes and frostings in here. Let's see. Cakes and frostings, yes. What's the one? Honey cake, which always is served around Rosh Hashanah for a sweet year. Somebody else's honey cake. Another honey cake. Feather sponge cake from Sally. And carrot cake. Carrot cake has a 1 cup of sugar, a whole cup of sugar in there. Carrot souffle cupcakes. More carrot, a lot of carrot cake, right? Cheesecake.
I don't see a link up there for Rabbi Brian's plaque fund.
There was I'll leave you with this story. There was a funny movie years ago called Salah. In the 1950s and 60s, the Jews living in Arab countries were kicked out. About 1 million of them were kicked out of Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Yemen. They all, and Iraq and Iran, they all ended up in Israel, 1 million Jews. And they really had a hard time finding jobs. They had to scramble. Eventually they found jobs, and now those particular Jews are the majority in Israel, no longer a minority. And one of the jobs, this movie was very funny. It was about a man who had a great job. He had only one job. When Americans came to visit Israel, they wanted to see the trees that they had planted. So each time a different, he had a plaque that said, Sam Cohen's Forest. You know, he had a big plaque that was written Sam Cohen's Forest. So Sam Cohen would come to visit, and they put the sign up, you know, Sam's Cohen Forest. Mr. Cohen goes back to the United States, and David Waldman shows. He says, "Well, where's my forest?" So the guy put up a sign that said David Waldman's Forest. You know, as long as you know who's coming, you can put the sign up.
Always there for us.
The idea is, you know, it's just a metaphor. The forest is, you're giving money to support the society of Israel. That's a connection a lot of people have, is giving charity. I have a little thing I keep every day, and I put a little, this is, I can't see it too well. This is the little box a lot of people had for many years, that you put money in every day. At the end of the month, I have 50, 60 bucks in here. I'll write a check or send it, put it online and give it to a charity. This month, I gave it to the Wafer, you know, the local food shelf. Other times I'll give it to a Jewish cause or somebody else. But anyway, it's just, you do a little every day. You know, if you put $1 in there every day, it's not much, but it adds up after a while, you know? So it's the idea of charity being this, you know, small increments, and you support other causes to it. That is today's light. Well, next time we'll start off with a Hebrew lesson, but I wonder if anybody had any questions? Anything, any incomplete thoughts you want to share with us? No? I know I covered a lot of material today. What I wanted you to take away from this is that you need to meditate. You need to get into yourself and get away from everything else. Take the time in your day. If you do it at daily practice, we'll learn how to do that with some Jewish prayers, just a few of them. For me, I go into another place when I'm leading services and I'm leading other people in song and prayer. I am transported to a level that's very different from daily life. So that's, you know, I can share my own experience. Other people have, you know, they have much higher level experiences. They go into trances, you know, when they see hallucinations, you know. So I can't speak for those. But that's
So it brings me to something that I did want to talk about or bring up.
Yeah.
And I understand just the thought of something is unclean or impure. And I find that through meditation, I think I answered my own question, but I'm able to accept, even though it's a thought, we can let it fleet and pass and watch those thoughts pass by. But I guess my question was, I mean, in all seriousness, I believe that the thought of certain actions are wrong, impure, unholy, clean. What is the, I guess, so you say you think something horrible, like, this person did something to a family member and I really want them to die. I'd like them to die. What is the recourse to go regress from that thought to be restored to a point of, I guess, purity?
Well,
you understand what I mean?
Purity for Jews is not an achievement. It's a goal. We can never be totally pure, totally divine. It sets a bar for us. I mean, you look at Martin Luther King. You know, this guy was a human being. You know, he cheated on his wife. He did horrible things morally, but there were things that in his life that were holy. You know, so you know, all of us have flaws, and you have to acknowledge those. All of us are going to have thoughts that are not pure and that may be obscene or violent. The idea is, if you think of other things at the time, you try to overcome those by thinking of positive thoughts. But you know, people tell me, Brian, you know, I was abused as a child, or you know, my father used to beat the crap out of me, or you know, someone had sexual abuse in their background, or a lot of people had drug abuse or alcohol abuse in their past. How do you get past that? I say the only way, you can't get rid of the old memories. They're going to be there.
Yeah.
But the only thing you can do is create new ones to overwrite it. You know how you have a CD? In the old days, we had videotape or audio tape. The only way you can get rid of it is overwriting, you know, recording over the old stuff.
Don't let it take hold, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it's in there. I don't know, any psychiatrist or psychologist will say you're gonna get rid of that horrible childhood experience you had, or that auto accident you had. You're never gonna get over it. But can you create something new that is somewhat better? So you don't focus on all of that. I mean, good psychiatrists, we have some here in town, and I've referred people to psychiatrists and psychologists. So much of that work is creating new positive thoughts, hope as opposed to despair. Um, and Judaism says we have answers to some of that stuff, but other people find that in other places, with Jesus or with Allah or with Buddha. Um, I know my yoga teacher is really into Hindi and Indian gods. The gods with the multiple arms and everything. The god who looks like an elephant. That's fine if it works for her. It's not a. It's I don't buy into. I do buy into the physical benefits of yoga, but I'm not going to do it because it's a new religion for me. So, but I love the idea of being able. We are like in our bodies. Our nervous system is like a tape recorder in many ways. It remembers everything, but we can always create new pathways in our nervous system and in our brain. Some people have like bad habits. I have a friend who's an alcoholic, and he's always going to reach for, but he's been in rehab for 40 years. He's been triple in AA for 40 years. But he always you take it one step at a time, one day, 1 hour at a time, getting past negative feelings and negative.
As long as that thought takes hold, I think that's when we're in trouble.
You're in trouble when you're so angry you're going to have an accident with somebody or run somebody over. When that happens, and the effects on other people, sometimes the effects are. I had somebody come to me a couple of weeks ago. He said, Rabbi Brian, I did something bad to somebody years ago. I think I mentioned that to you in the previous class, but
yeah, last week.
Oh, last week we talked about it, and he still has guilt over what's happened, even though he has no way of resolving it. He can't even find the person to say, I'm sorry, and I'd like to make it up to you. Can I put your kid through college or whatever, however he feels he's going to make it up to her. So he has to forgive himself eventually. He's going to live with what he did, whether it was verbal, physical, whatever he did with her. He's got to move on and live with himself. Those people can't live with themselves, kill themselves, or they kill themselves with alcohol or drugs. If they don't die, they're burying those thoughts in a way that, when you drink or take drugs to get rid of a thought, it's still going to come back after you recover from maybe the idea is like, you keep drinking. I guess it's,
yeah, I'm with you.
You wake up the next day, but that's not good. You hurt the people around you with drugs and alcohol. Certainly create with drugs, you're creating some, especially illegal drugs, you're creating a criminal element. I get the La Crosse Tribune messages every day on my phone. You guys get La Crosse Tribune? It's an
I get other types of messages like that. Yeah, I get crime alerts and stuff
every
like that.
Day. Yeah, and every day they have the people who've been arrested, their mugshot and what they're arrested for. In this town, 90% of the arrests are for crystal meth.
Oh.
I don't see it. I can't get any. I tried the other day, but
wow.
I went to the motel downtown. There was nobody there. No, I don't know. These people are getting they're getting arrested for 0.2 grams of tiny amounts of crystal meth. None of them are carrying pounds of the stuff. It's not like Breaking Bad, the guy on TV who manufactured this stuff. But these people are going to prison for weeks or months or years. And the effect that they have on their and I've helped people. I've visited people in prison. I go to the jail. These days they're restricting that because of COVID. We can't even visit people in jail anymore. But it's tough. One of the people I was working with has been sent to New Lisbon to a higher correctional facility, a higher security. It's horrible. They can't see visitors, so it's really a tragic situation. It all started with drugs, and inability to control his own use. It also became a way to make money. So I'm not going to judge anybody, but I'm going to leave it with that. I've already taken you guys way over time. So thank you.
Don't let it take a hold.
I feel guilty right now, but okay. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. I hope we can get together again next week. And if you think of anything you want to talk about, text me or call me. I'll be glad to help.
Okay.
All right. Well, I love you
Thank
all.
you, Brian. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for sharing today, guys.
Good to
Yeah.
see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good to see everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.